believe I have all the slides loaded. Whoops. A button. Yeah, okay, should we wait a couple minutes past the hour? Okay, hi everybody. It is 5 p.m. So we're going to get started. For the trouble kids in the back, John Peterson. All right. Welcome everybody to the more instant messaging interoperability working group. Thanks for coming here despite the exciting plants BOF. So first off, please make yourself aware of the note well, which I suspect you've seen it several times this week already. Oh yeah, I believe these are the updated bits. If you're in the room and you haven't already, please scan the QR code or use the on-site tool to make sure that your presence is on the record. And then can we please have a volunteer to take notes today? There's a can of worms. Unfortunately, as usual, we cannot proceed until somebody agrees to do this. Thank you.
What's your name?
May I ask you your name for the record? Stefan. Thank you. Very much appreciated. All right. So our agenda today, we have the chair stuff we're doing right now. Then after that, we have a couple of drafts pertaining to identifiers and then identity. So Mimi identifiers is Conrad's draft, but Raphael is going to present on his behalf since Conrad isn't here today, at least not in person, mind you. Then Rowan on Mimi identity. And then after that, Rowan has several more documents to present. And finally, Srini D, I apologize if I mangled that, has some stuff for us on deletion accounting. Okay, before moving on, do we have any agenda bash? Anything else? Okay, nothing in the chat either. So one procedural update. We closed out some open issues on the GitHub repository for draft IETF Mimi content. They're listed here. So in one case, the issue was raised, a solution was proposed, no objections, a PR was merged, so that seems to be pretty clearly done. In all the other cases, Rowan provided some information to the originator. There wasn't any action for a number of weeks or months, so those also seem resolved. But like as ever, if anyone feels that there's more to say about any of these issues, you can just reopen the issue on GitHub and post whatever question. All right, so that's it for the chairs. So Raphael, I believe you're up. Do you want to use the clicker, or do you want us to drive?
Oh, I can use the clicker.
Okay, wait one sec. Where is the button? Slides control. What the heck?
Oh, slides.
Oh, right, it's on the user. Can you? Here you go. Thanks.
Okay.
We're good? Okay, yeah. So like Tim already said, I'm presenting on behalf of Conrad. So to give a little bit of background, there is the other draft by Rowan called Mimi Identity. And I think that one was expired for quite a while. That's why we looked at Mimi identifiers instead, or started that. But it's really only a fraction of the identity draft. And so the idea is not to propose a new document here. The idea is just to get the conversation started. And I think some of it happened on the mailing list already. So yeah, I'm just gonna present a bit on that. Then we can take questions. So the idea here is to use 3 categories of identifiers, essentially. So the first one is something that we haven't spoken about so far, as I recall, in the Mimi working group. So those are identifiers that are specific to establishing a connection between users. So they have a set of properties. One is that they're globally unique. They're also user-facing, typically chosen by a user, and there can be more than one per user. They can also, and since there can be more than one, there's a certain element of ephemerality to it. So the best example for that, because this is a little abstract at this point, would be Signal usernames. Their sole purpose is to actually connect to someone. But after that, the username is no longer used. You don't see it in the interface. It's nothing that is used, at a technical level in the background. It's not part of the protocol. It's just gone essentially. So its only purpose is to establish a connection. And I think that can also be the case for phone numbers with WhatsApp and Signal, although in some cases you might still see them as a longer term identifier as well. So yeah, matrix start usernames, where essentially you have some sort of a username and a domain as a combination, can also be used for connection establishment, but not exclusively. And the next one, the next category of identifiers would be administrative identifiers. So those are the ones, should start with the last bullet point, that are immutable. So they clearly reference one user account for the duration of, or for the lifetime of that user account, essentially. That is probably where in Ron's draft the certificates come in, that essentially attest that that user is part of a service, part of a domain. This one is also globally unique. It doesn't have to be user-facing, and it can also be provider-generated. So one example here would be UUIDs, which is, I think, what iMessage uses. So this is very much part of the protocol, because that identifies users in an MLS group, essentially. Ron, do you have an immediate question for that? Go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that, you mentioned certificates. I don't think that there's any specific requirement that a credential needs to refer to administrative identifier as opposed to one of the others, but it is perhaps more likely that you would refer to administrative identifier because of the immutable nature.
Right. Yeah, this is all to be discussed, obviously, but the intuition here is that it at least refers to administrative identifiers, because those are the ones in the leaves in an MLS group. An MLS needs credentials of some sort. You cannot go without credentials in MLS. So whatever we call the identifier in the leaf in the MLS group needs a credential. So, but the important part here is that there is not necessarily a link between the first one, the connection establishment identifiers, and the administrative identifiers. Sorry? So again, this is exactly how Signal works. That being said, before I get to display names, that doesn't mean that you have to have a distinct connection identifier. It just means that the possibility is actually there. The last one is kind of trivial, but it's also important because typically what you see in a lot of user interfaces at the user level is a display name, and that is something that is chosen by the users. It's certainly not globally unique. You can have collisions. Sometimes it's not even visible to the provider, and that's the case with Signal. Not sure how WhatsApp does that. And I think, yeah, Metrics also has that. Not sure if they encrypt them or not. So this is yet another aspect of let's say from a UX perspective of identity and identifiers of users. To what degree Mimi will have to standardize things around display names, we'll have to see, but it's part of the bigger picture. And I think that's it already. So the idea here is to propose to define these three categories. And then we see in what draft that's going to end up, essentially. Yeah, questions?
Hi, John Peterson. I should probably actually put it in the tool, shouldn't I? But yeah, I mean, obviously we've run this code a bit, both for messaging and for telephone calls for some time to try to figure out what the circumstances are in which users should be able to tell who they're communicating with. And I understand that there are some applications for which that is not a strong requirement, some messaging applications. You referred, for example, to the way that kind of Signal has a layer of indirection between the identifiers you use to actually do rendezvous and what the display names are that are shown to users. But I mean, the majority of messaging cases that I find interesting, at least, you know, and there's a huge amount of industry discussion about this in arenas like RCS, which is obviously looking at tools similar to this for business messaging. Perfect example of a case where, like, you know, consumers should be able to trust there's actually a bank, you know, that is Bank of America that is communicating with them over something like RBM, or, you know, take your pick of the variety of similar proposals that are out there in the ecosystem right now. And so I'm a little bit concerned about like decoupling what is displayed to the user that is trusted by the user entirely from, you know, the underlying identifiers that we have an ability to link to credentials that can cryptographically prove who these people are. Obviously, we've gone to a lot of trouble to do this for telephone numbers for calls, but like, you know, you could say the same for the PKI you would use to validate like domain names and everything else. So I mean, kind of what I know how Rowan sees this, and I think we're slightly aligned on this. I don't see how those pieces fit together here for you.
So are you referring to display names now? So or which category are you referring
Yeah,
to
so
specifically?
this is exactly my point. The categories themselves, if all that gets rendered to participants in a chat room is a display name that says Bank of America and no underlying identifier that is cryptographically provable, like or you have any reason to trust, like, you know, then obviously there is a serious problem here if we're going to use this for anything other than toy applications, right? And so, yeah, like I'm concerned about the relationship between display names and the underlying identifiers. And how do you see those things fitting together here in a way that would lead to enterprises being able to use this for like trusted business communications?
Right. I mean, I think we're in violent agreement that if you talk to Bank of America and they get to choose their own display name and nobody checks it, or, you know, vice versa, you talk to an attacker pretending to be Bank of America, that is a problem. But for that, we would have the administrative identifiers. Again, this is what identifies a user as like cryptographically as part of an MLS group, MLS being the foundation of Mimi. Whether or not that is displayed is not part of the proposal here. I'm not saying that this should never be displayed and instead we should only display display names. That's not the proposal. I'm just essentially trying to establish these categories, but not trying to come up with a particular UX around it. It might well be that we say, okay, we don't want display names whatsoever because they're not cryptographically rooted in anything.
Yep.
That might be an okay outcome as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just making the point that we have a ton of identifiers when you go back a slide to your administrative ones, and even maybe even to the previous one, but because this doesn't even list things like telephone numbers or email addresses, or well, I guess it kind of does. It says matrix style usernames, which are similar enough, right?
Sure. I mean,
we have a ton of existing infrastructure for proving things like a domain name that is B of A or whatever .com, and a ton of things for proving like somebody can use a telephone number. And I'm just concerned that, you know, a discussion that is not taking into account the existence of those cryptographic instruments and figuring out how we're going to get end-to-end trust between participants through these chat rooms is looking at the problem from the wrong direction. Sorry, lost.
No, I mean, I think I fully agree with that. And sorry if the list of examples is way too short here. Yeah. Vittorio.
Hi, Vittorio Bertola. So, well, Thanks for resuming the topic. I think there was a lot of discussion around this topic 2 years ago when we started in several drafts, including one by myself that is, of course, expired since long. So one thing I wanted to stress again, that at least as a desire, is that I think we should be able to allow users to own their identifiers, at least the public phase, not the administrative ones, if the administrative ones are the ones that for identifying them on a specific service, but the ones that will be used in public to exchange contacts. Because then these allow, I mean, the reason why we are doing this, yeah.
You mean these ones?
Could be, I mean, yeah, I'm still not completely comfortable with this language, but anyway, the point of creating all these elaborate interoperability mechanism is to allow users to break free from walled gardens and be able to move from one messaging provider to another messaging provider without having to restart all the conversations and contacts. And this implies that there must be a unique identifier for the user that, I mean, persists when they move from one provider to another, or maybe it could even be connected to more than one per service identifier, so that they have multiple. So I think these are user-facing properties that are important, and the identifier system should support them. Then, of course, I think we still have to have an entire discussion on how to do that, but I wanted to raise the point again.
Okay. There's more folks in the queue.
I don't understand what there is for the protocol to do with the display names. Are you like talking about them so that you put them out of scope?
That's one option, yeah.
Okay.
Again, I'm not making a specific proposal here. It could also be supported because others do that, like Signal has it. So in a purely, consumer messaging world, which I think is very much in scope, that is the standard, effectively, to have display names. How that is then combined with like administrative identifiers that have public keys, etc., is an open question at this point.
It just feels like a product decision to me.
Could
mean,
be, yeah.
Like the STIR documents don't say what needs to be displayed, but a bunch of people decided how things were going to be displayed.
But to get back to your question, how that relates to Mimi, I think the idea here is that if we think we want display names and they're not a proprietary addition to the protocol, and we want them, for example, to be end-to-end encrypted so that the providers don't see them, then we would have to specify how that works, essentially.
Then it feels like it's just like another content type, I guess. But
they
don't have a function
differently,
in the
but yeah.
protocol otherwise, right? It could be like any piece of user information that needs to be end-to-end encrypted.
Exactly. It needs to be end-to-end encrypted. It needs to be readily available when somebody joins a group. That's how it's a little different from regular messages.
I see.
So it needs to be like encrypted at rest, if you will. Yeah.
Okay.
Ron?
It feels optional.
Yeah. So just to make sure that I'm understanding where the boundary of a display name ends and begins in your taxonomy, is like my Discord handle, is that a display name in your taxonomy?
I'm not familiar enough with Discord and how they use handles.
It's like, I have an @ something, and that's what people see. I don't necessarily, that doesn't need to be under the hood, an identifier that's being, could be using a UUID under the hood as an administrative identifier. And I could have found it via some other discovery means, but like it's how people see and know me on.
Is that how they find you as well?
Not necessarily. Maybe if you think of it as like the handle on GitHub.
Well, I know GitHub, you can find people through that.
You can, but you don't have to. But if you don't have to, does that make it one or both, one of the other, or both?
Yeah, I mean, sorry if I'm not familiar enough with exactly how Discord works, but it sounds like it's at least something that is being displayed, so that would make it a display name. But if you can find people with it, then that would also be an identifier for the connection establishment.
Boy, it's so hard to manage these things from my phone. I'm like, now I can't. Now I need to figure out how to get myself out of the queue. But since I've been here anyway, Just want to say, yeah, regarding the way display names are handled and things like stir, interestingly, of course, we created a whole specific format for rendering a signature over a display name so that you could tell who it is that is asserting this is a display name this person's allowed to use. So we have like the numbers, and then we actually have this thing called RCD, rich call data, that lets you say things like these are names or logos or other things that are actually associated with that you trust only because you trust the person who signed that object, right? And that's, at the end of the day, what I'm going to come down to on all of this, I'm sure, is just I'm really interested in a world where end users have an end-to-end security association with whoever they're talking to so that they know their identity in cases where identity is relevant. That's it. That capability needs to exist, right?
Absolutely.
And like anything that obfuscates that or creates possibilities for impersonation or anything else, and I feel like the ways the distinctions are being drawn here, like, just seem to leave a lot of room for mischief. I'm
Okay,
gonna figure out how to get my hand down.
That's totally fair. I mean, I think we're in agreement with that, because we're now looking at the spectrum again between consumer messaging and essentially business messaging, and the two can come together if a consumer talks to their bank, as you just said. So you absolutely want to be sure you talk to the right bank, or in fact the right organization. Whereas, in the other direction, it's maybe not as relevant. So again, the standard for consumer messaging is to use display names. That's what Signal does. That's what Wire does. That's and they're not even a pure consumer messenger at this point. That's what Matrix does. That's, I think, what iMessage does, etc. So I feel at this point, display names are very much in scope if we look at the competitor landscape. But the proposal here is not to obfuscate meaningful information, which I think would be the administrative identifier when that is necessary. Marvin.
So one of the examples that you have for administrative identifier is a UID.
Yes.
I fail to see how an end user will be able to make anything useful out of an UID if they only have the display name and the UID. If that's the only two identifiers that they have and the display name can be spoofed, then they have nothing.
I mean, this is how iMessage and Signal work. Because of the phone number, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you mind saying that in the mic?
Really not going to try to use the tool. John Peterson, once again, just to say, yeah, I don't believe that is how iMessage works. In the sense, iMessage's enrollment originally was all of telephone numbers, but Apple IDs are surrogates for those, and those Apple IDs take the form of user at domain. We have ways of securing both the telephone numbers and domains associated with those.
Okay.
Yes, there are underlying UUIDs that are in like the iCloud fabric. They are not exposed to any consumer, right? The things you see when you send iMessages to people are email address-like identifiers and telephone numbers. Now, if you want to call those display names in that case and say that what the UUID is the real ID for it, this is where I think conceptually there's a vast gulf between our positions about this. So I think it's the other way around, right? Well, I think the UUIDs are just hidden, numinal magic, and like the actual identifiers and display names are those email addresses or telephone numbers.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that clarification. Then I take it back and I say this is how Signal works. Is that one more question coming up, or?
It's fine.
Take your time.
Just like,
Thing that
just
you walked around the whole room, though. That was
if you use the mic and identify yourself, it's going to be
Yes.
good enough.
Thank you. Hi, Mark Schritt from Germ. I formerly worked on iMessage. Your Apple account is immutable. Your phone number, email addresses, those are mutable. So there is a UUID, and that is the source of truth. So I think for a lot of purposes, including merging, there is a immutable identifier, which I think is practically a UUID in this case.
Sorry, so you're proposing the mutable identifier should be a UUID? Did I get that right?
I'm saying that iMessage does work with the UUID as the administrative identifier because the other elements are mutable.
Okay. Okay, so I guess that was exactly what was intended, a bit of discussion. We're probably going to have some more of that. I don't know, any more questions on this? No. Then going to leave it to, I guess, Ron is next.
Hello, everyone. All right.
So yeah, for this, you need like the first part of your big deck, right?
This is right.
Okay, cool.
This is it. So, and the clicker is, this clicker works?
Give it a try.
Yeah, it should work now.
Okay. So I'm going to start talking about Mimi identity since the topic is relevant. And by the way, I just want to say that I happen to think that it's a great thing for people to break off a big, something big, to break off a small piece of it and do a discussion that is bite size and that people can discuss on a mailing list. That's great. I don't have any problem with people making discussing some aspect of a draft as long as they do it cohesively. So I read this draft. I didn't change much. There's some new references, pointers to things. But we're now at the point where we've progressed a bit with, quite a bit with content, a bit with, pretty well with protocol, and we're starting to push along concrete stuff in room policy, but we haven't talked about concretely what we're going to require for identity. And so I'm going to talk about what do we do on the credential side part of this. So Mimi is about interop. We have not said anything yet in Mimi about what specific MLS credential type or types we're going to use and why and what those properties are. So I'm going to say, I'm going to kind of speak out of turn here, but how do we safely interop? That's really important. What if one or more of the providers is currently using basic MLS credentials? Ooh, that doesn't sound very good. I don't like that. So instead of using basic credentials, maybe we should be using a kind of credential that has actual crypto built into it. So I listed the credential types which have so far been proposed. We have the multi-credential and weak multi-credential, which are used in order to allow us to have ands and ors of other credential types, which is great. We have X509, which is in RFC 9420. And then I wrote a draft for SD JOTs, that is selective disclosure JSON web tokens. This can really actually be any JSON web token. And SD COTS, selective disclosure CBOR web tokens. And this can be any CBOR web token as long as it has a confirmation key. Now, why is this important? So Raphael was talking about these different types of identifiers and how if you're going to be referring to something in, say, Mimi protocol by a UUID with domain name kind of identifier, and you also want people to be able to have this kind of linkage that John Peterson described, where we want to be able to see things which are meaningful to the human. Well, X509 is not very good at that. It has a subject and then has a bunch of extensions. Yes, there's a subject alt name, which has a bunch of different names for the subject, but semantically, it's still the subject. Web tokens have claims. So these are properties or attributes of the subject. They're not the name of the subject or multiple names of the subject per se. And so it's actually quite easy for us to have a credential that has both, say, a UUID style identifier and also one that maybe an email style identifier or a phone number style identifier or all three or or more. And so I've been really drawn to this, and so a system that I have been helping to build and design, it uses these kind of credentials. It has claims, and so you can have multiple assertions about different things about the subject. So I think that that's super important. I think that we need to come up with a set of you know of identity use cases and then identity requirements. And I think that it will become clear that this is a good way to do that, not necessarily the only way, but that we're going to need to come up with some way of kind of gluing all these things together. And if anybody is going to go to the ADP BOF, they're talking about wanting to do secure messaging, and we have multiple providers that have implemented MLS for messaging. We have people who are talking about doing Mimi content. We could potentially have these people all these companies all exchanging messages, but one of the biggest limiting factors is in fact identity. Richard, do you want me to wait to the end of the slide, or you want to go now?
Well, you mentioned my BOF. Richard Barnes, ATP BOF chair. I just wanted to clarify that messaging is nowhere near the topic for that BOF. But there are some identity issues involved there, and so there may yet be some overlap, even if it's not messaging overlap.
Could one of you tell us what AED or TP stands for?
It's the Authenticated Transfer Protocol.
But basically, it's the protocol that
It's Blue Sky.
Blue Sky uses. So you can do Twitter-like things, but in a way where you don't need to be beholden to your particular server. Anyway, enough of that. Okay, so what other things do we need to consider here to make interop a reality? So the other two things that we really need to think about is how do you find and manage appropriate trust roots in Mimi? If you've got multiple providers, this means I've got certificate chains or certificate trust roots. If you're using COTS and JOTS, it means you have configuration of valid issuers. You need to be able to find valid key sets. You need to be able to say, well, what provider domain names, for example, are trusted for which Mimi URIs? That's important. And finally, it's probably pretty important to be able to do revocation or something like that. So you could do that with status lists. You could do that with certificate revocation list style revocation. But these are things that we need to start talking about. Would anyone like to make any comments about this now? And does anyone think that this is controversial? Does anyone think we should not be doing this?
I mean, I think I like those 4 sub-bullets there. I think that about hits the waterfront of useful stuff right now. It seems like if we were going to try and have a framework into which most things could be banged, you could pretty much do it with that combination of stuff. So yeah, it seems like a good list to have in mind.
Thank you. Raphael.
I think you alluded to that earlier, and it's not in the list. So do you want to categorically exclude basic credentials? And if so, on what grounds?
Well, I think that we need to be able to explain how you can safely prevent impersonation across providers.
Across providers, like
that if I'm in a group, if I'm on provider A and I receive a message from provider B that asserts to be from Bob, I want some cryptographic way of being assured that Bob is not being impersonated by his provider or somebody else on the way.
So you're saying essentially the domain name has to be part of the credentials.
I mean, that is how I would do it, but I'm not saying that's the requirement. I'm saying the requirement is to prevent impersonation, and if somebody presents some way of gluing together, out of band a bunch of things about something that has a basic credential, I will take a look at it with open eyes. But it sure as hell seems way easier to use one of these other credential types, a cryptographic credential type.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I fully agree. You have to know with which, I think we can say domain, that's part of the terminology we're using, maybe, with which domain a user is actually associated. It wouldn't be acceptable to confuse them somehow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That's it for identity. Are you disappointed, John? You wanted more fireworks?
Sorry, quick one. So yeah, I'm disappointed because I thought you were, I don't know, present something that is going to contradict what I said earlier or corroborate what I said earlier, or any of that. But apparently not.
I asked one clarifying question during your presentation, and the only controversial thing I said about it, perhaps controversial, was the idea that we can have with web tokens, we can have claims that cover multiples of these instead of trying to shoehorn them awkwardly into say an X509 subject alt name.
Okay, thanks.
John Peterson again. Man, I was just thinking back, like I remember there's some requirements document they were working on like years and years ago here. And we spent all this time trying to figure out what to call different kinds of identifiers, whether they're service specific identifiers or service independent identifiers. Yeah. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was in this room, right? Yeah, I think so. I think that would be.
No, it's in the discovery document.
Oh, it's in the discovery document.
Yes.
Isn't your name on that?
It is actually. I should mention my name is on that discovery document.
Funny thing.
But like that requirements document actually like tried to articulate a distinction again between identifiers that were service independent and identifiers that were service specific. We went through a bunch of different permutations of that. I think it's a more useful lens to look at these identifiers through in some respect. We're talking about domains, for example. Like, because some things, are service specific and they have a domain that's associated with them. And then other kinds of identifiers aren't for various reasons, right? And like, so I'm not sure domain is the right term. That's part of what I came up here to inject controversy in the discussion about. I mean, I think this is a good start, but my question is really, so what are we gonna do here with this exactly? Like, okay, there were four bullets there, Richard, you were comfortable with, right? And so those are credential types we need to support. Like I've looked at the selective disclosure stuff. I was, and again, looking at this through the lens of what we had to do for telephone numbers, I can kind of imagine how we'd map some of the things we've done onto that. But I mean, are we charged to build a concrete protocol? Are we going to do the requirements phase that you were suggesting? If we're going to do a requirements phase on this and actually look at what those credentials should be like, I would go back to all those discussions we're having about service-specific identifiers and everything else. Well, or is it not worth our time to do any of this?
Yeah. I mean, there needs to be somebody who is prepared to go and implement. But certainly using terminology from a document that was well discussed is a good thing. But right now we barely, like people have been barely thinking about the problem at this level. So we need to reintroduce the working group to the problem at this level before we're going to be able to go 2 or 3 levels deeper. So that was my purpose for having this discussion today. Tim.
Right. So the brutal reductionist in me sees one thing called Mimi identity and one thing called Mimi identifiers, and I wonder, like, can these two be resolved? Do they both need to go forward? What do we want to do with these documents?
Like I said initially, I think our proposal is not to propose the Mimi identifier document for adoption. It was really just to get some discussion going maybe that could become a section of the MIMI identity document. I don't know how you see that, Ron.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
Plus
that John brings up some good points about us going and having a, rereading the discovery document and remembering what's in there and what terminology we've got. And if there's something missing, well, we can certainly use new terminology, but to the extent that there are terms there, I think we should use them. To the extent that there are terms in the MIMI, the draft May MIMI identity document, we should, at least open an issue and say this one is wrong if it's wrong, and change it to something else. Those are all good and reasonable things for us to do. It's a good way for us to engage in process-wise. Yeah, say.
Okay, so it sounds
Syntax.
like you'd want to do like more study and possibly implementation before you'd go so far as adopt something in the working group,
I would say, let's
or at least like talk to implementers.
maybe, John can send like, hey, I think you should incorporate these 6 terms in this document over there. Maybe Raphael can do something similar like, hey, I don't like this definition and you should go and add these 2. And if you think you want a whole section, great, like send a little mini outline or a PR or whatever, and we'll work it out.
Yeah, sounds like a good starting point. And yeah, thanks, John, for reminding us about this important work we'd all forgotten about.
All right. So, MIMI content. All right. Changes since the draft -06 from the previous IETF. Pretty small. Fixed a bug in the generation of message IDs. So now they're generated according to the text in the draft. Clarified that the salt is always 16 octets. I did a bunch of work on the tooling. So now when you build the tools, we're building them correctly according to the CDDL, and the CBOR is all good. Biggest change was last time I moved the MIMI message status format into a separate document. So question for the group, which I asked last time, but we didn't really get an answer. Can we adopt the message status since it was part of this working group document before? Do we need to do something different?
Well, I'll put the question to the room. Would anybody?
Who has read the document?
That's a good one. Who has read the document?
The message status document.
Okay, we see some hands.
4 hands.
6.
It's pretty good for Mimi.
You count,
Yeah. Jim, Marvin, Mark.
Anybody
Raphael.
remote?
Oh, okay.
If you're remote and you've read it, please speak up in the chat. I mean, that number's not bad for Mimi.
6, yeah.
Relative standard.
I mean, it's been in MIMI content from the beginning, so it's not like it's a
And
brand new thing.
Here, the other question is, would anybody object to this getting adopted? Well, I mean,
Classic IETF move there.
I learned from the best. Okay, so I mean, all right, chairs will talk about it, but my guess is that we would go confirm this on the list, and we'll probably adopt.
Okay. All right. So there are no PRs. There are 2 issues. I proposed an IANA registration for dispositions. This is pretty much just work. I'll work on a PR for this unless somebody has something to say and thinks that this is a terrible idea. If so, please speak up. And then we have the message ID calculation. So currently it is possible with a very permissive MIMI hub that you could potentially have a hash of a sender URI, room URI, message, and salt where you have the same message, the same salt, but a different sender URI and room URI, a different pair of sender URIs and room URIs, where one was sort of overlapping the other, that could output a duplicate message ID. So the options that have been discussed were using a null separator. I really don't want to do that. That just seems like it would break a bunch of implementations in really bad ways. We could use a non-URI ASCII character separator, for example, the pipe character between sender URI and room URI. Since sender URI has to be a URI and cannot contain the pipe character, and room URI cannot contain a pipe character, that would work. We could CBOR encode the hash input, which means that we have a variable length thing here. So for example, if this URI is relatively short, it would be 781A for this length of URI and 781E for this length. But if it was larger than 255 characters, this would be 79, and then 2 more octets to express the length. Also, this could be 0, 1, 2, or 4 more octets. Salt would always be 16. Finally, we could just add an explicit length. So I could just put 2 octets of big endian length there and 2 there, and we could put that all together. Raphael.
I understood that you're looking for some input on that.
Sure.
So yeah, it's a hash function. It's going to eat up any byte you feed it. So it really doesn't matter what it is, like including the 0 terminated strings. That would not be a problem for a hash function. But I think the best way to do it, since we don't want to introduce another dependency on CBOR or the TLS codec or whatever, really to be the last option here, to include the length.
What about the pipe character? Why would that be bad?
The length is just more explicit, but yeah, I don't have a strong opinion here. Like it's become a bit of a standard to use encoding that is prefixed with a length to disambiguate stuff, and then you're mimicking that manually, and that makes it great somehow. But off the top of my head, I don't see why the pipe would be a problem.
Okay. Hey, Jim.
Pardon me? I believe I was in the queue first.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I'm done being mean. Speaking as an individual, I agree with Raphael. The thing to do is to prefix with length.
Jim.
What Raphael and what he said. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Jim Reed speaking for myself. I think it's a good idea to use an explicit byte count for the length of the labels. It smells very much like the DNS wire format, and I like that, of course, because I'm a DNS guy. I don't like the idea of using a pipe symbol or any kind of other non-URI ASCII character, because maybe at some point in the future, the URI specs might change, and the character that we're using think it will never be used in a URI will end up being legal in a URI, and that will cause some confusion. If we get an explicit byte count, we don't have that problem.
Okay. Can we just have a quick show of hands does anybody object to using the explicit length? Does anyone want to speak in favor of something else, of not doing this? Because I just want to get this done.
No, looks like you're good.
Okay, I'm going to do that. And so I will write those 2 PRs, merge them, close this, and maybe we could even start a working group last call. Hey. All right, awesome. FYI, I'm building an interoperability repo, and we'll hopefully here pretty soon have some messages in Harness that you can send some messages and receive some messages and see how that works. So stay tuned. If you want to help, please send me a message. Thanks very much. Next, Mimi protocol. Yay. Okay. Changes since the last IETF. Basically merged more franking fixes. So this has now been implemented. Found a couple of things during implementation, found a couple of things just because there were typos and things like that. The biggest change is probably just that instead of franking content, this was discussed at the previous IETF, that we had this sort of, smush these things together, concatenate these things for the context, the franking context. And instead, now this is a TLS struct. It's actually much easier to read. I was a bit resistant to doing this. And as soon as I did it, I was like, that was the right thing to do. Mea culpa. Yeah, I mean, as you can see on the bottom, some of the comments, some of the changes were really quite trivial, like moving a comma and merging some, wrapping some lines. I think this is pretty solid now. As I said, it's been implemented, and would love to test with somebody else. If anybody gets around to doing franking, would love to test franking some messages. Still have one PR. So this is related to what you do with valid pending proposals. So right now we've got self-remove and app data update proposals, and I believe app ephemeral proposals in MLS are valid in external commits. So in order to use them, you would need a way to get them. So when you get, basically you need to be able to include in the, when getting the group info and the ratchet tree, we also need to be able to get the pending proposals at the same time. So this is a short PR. That's all of it on the screen. I think this is a straightforward thing. I would like to merge this. But it seemed kind of important to at least bring this up to everybody so people were aware. Hearing no discussion.
I mean, if you really want to be sure, you could always post something to the list and be like, I'll merge this on Friday unless somebody chimes in.
Yeah.
But there's time left, so we can always make more changes to the document, right?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, if I merge this and somebody says in 3 weeks time this was a stupid idea and I want you to want you to pull it back, I can still do that. So the magic of Git. We have a smaller number of issues, but at this point, most of these issues are things that I can just go do. Maybe some of them will require some list discussion, like if I make a proposal for how to do Knox, I'm not just going to go merge it. I'm going to write a PR and post it to the list, and we can talk about it. Certainly the threat model, I might make an initial stab at a threat model, but it's going to need a lot of review from this group. And also documenting evil scenarios related to collusion is going to be also in that category. Raphael.
Yeah, I looked at the number one here, the 133.
Yeah.
On GitHub, it was empty. What is it about?
So we had an issue for sharing arbitrary state. And then the issue said, okay, well, we have a way to share arbitrary state with the hub and the members, but we don't have a way to share it with only with members or a subset of members. And so that issue is a placeholder for being able to encrypt, state to members and have it go past the hub without the hub seeing it.
So what you're referring to, just for clarification, before was the semi-private messages. That's what you said is the one to share.
Semi-private message is shared with the hub and members.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I understood that correctly. Yeah. So, but this is to share state only between the members. But So you're looking at stuff that is not part of application messages because that's what they're for, right?
So I think people had been talking about the idea of having a way to put encrypted stuff in the group context that members could get later. If the right answer is we say, if you ever want to share anything with only members, send an application message, and you may have to send it multiple times when new joiners arrive. I think that is a valid approach, but we need to say that if that's the approach we're taking, and we need to decide that that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm not arguing against it at all. Quite the opposite, actually. I'm in favor of doing this because this has to do with the privacy preserving stuff. So the fundamental problem is that it's important to be able to decrypt end-to-end encrypted state as you join a group in a setting that is completely asynchronous. So application messages are not going to work for that. So yeah, absolutely in favor of that. I just want to make sure that that is what you intended to do here.
Yeah. So you said it's absolutely essential. I think it's important. I'm not sure that
How's
this
that
group
different?
100% agrees that it is essential.
Okay.
But that's a good discussion for us to have. And you could feel free to go and fill in some comments on that issue, and we can post it to list and discuss
It's
it.
essential for the privacy preserving mode, not for maybe protocol in general. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to talk about any of the other issues? So Lincoln thinks there's not enough gaming content in this protocol. Okay, so what's next? So protocol, it still needs a knock scheme. It needs a versioning scheme. We need to close the open issues. One of those open issues is 133. So we need to discuss that and figure out if we've got consensus on sharing secret stuff with future members, with new joiners. And we're going to need some implementation interop. So I think that it sounds like we are close to having 2 implementations of substantial parts of MIMI protocol, but we're not quite where we are with MIMI content, where we have like 3 people, 4 people who say they've got an implementation and are almost ready to test. Raphael.
Yeah, I already asked this last time. Who wants to do interop? We already posted our GitHub URLs. Who's the other implementation?
Yeah, so I have an implementation, but I'm not ready to reveal the source of the implementation yet. And when I am, you will know. I will send you a message.
Sounds mysterious. Okay.
It's just called stealth mode. That's all. All right. Lastly, room policy. So this didn't get a lot of love, but since 01, I made a stab at adding some non-trivial stuff here. So as you can see from the structs, these are all things that I added, which are, there's a lot of things in here, but it's really 2 categories of things. One is from the MLS architecture document, RFC 9750, section 7, there is an MLS operational parameters list that are a whole bunch of things that members and sometimes the DS and the AS need to agree on in order for you to be able to have a functioning MLS group. So this the stuff on the left side here, the extended capabilities, the pending proposal strategy, pending proposal policy, app message policy, and then this operational parameters thing. This is all stuff that appears in that section. And I left out a few things that were only really relevant between a client and its own DS, mostly related to key package management. So the idea here is we've got a bunch of stuff here. I would like to keep this separate and make it a separate component, because I think, and it'd be great if people would look at that in the MLS community and say, hey, what there do we, is there anything we can get rid of? Because it's kind of big. But I do think that it's really useful to be able to communicate, even for non-Mimi implementations, to be able to have a component that says, this is what's configured in this group. You need to be able to do things this way. Otherwise, we're going to have trouble communicating. I also did an asset policy, and this is much simpler. This is like, are you allowed to download, upload, particular types? Somebody asked me about sizes, and I was like, yeah, we could add sizes to this. You could have maximum sizes, quotas, that kind of thing, if you want. But the important point is that there is a sort of a start of a policy here, which was one of the areas that was left out of the previous document. There is currently one PR, which is reorganizing the table of capabilities as a table and giving code points that are spread out apart by the kind of capabilities. So like capabilities related to membership are in one chunk, one range, and related to, say, media or assets is in another range. And yeah, there were some places where their names didn't match from the definitions with the list of capabilities in IANA. That's been fixed now. I think that should be all good. And we have 5 issues. So last time Timo came and presented, and he had some issues with these first 2. He had some, let's see. He wanted to do it a different way for the first 2 issues than the way that it's currently done in the draft. I think, do you recall what was said there? I think something about a concrete proposal.
Yes.
That sounds like the sort of thing we would say, yes.
So here it is, 4 months later. I'm not aware of any concrete proposal. How are we going to wait longer? I did not, but I also was like, wrote this at the draft deadline and then came here. So
right. Maybe like do that once, and then if you get nothing, then you can go on. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll reach out to him either this week or Monday. And I propose also that we close issue 3. This was a question, and I think the question is, I went through and just made sure, I think since that issue is opened, the text is a little bit clearer. There have been a couple of like small changes over the intervening sort of 2 or 3 revs. So I think we can close number 3. Number 8 is partially done because I did the download policies, but I didn't do link policies yet. So I can do a PR on link policies, then hopefully we can close this one. And yeah, I think the stuff on bans, there's some information there, but I could use a little bit more non-normative text. And that's it. So. The clicker is not working.
That's the last slide.
Oh, well. And that's all we
Yay,
wrote.
you made it.
And look at that. We're okay. 4 minutes late. Sorry.
4 minutes late. Is it true?
6 o'clock? No.
2 hours left.
Oh, we have 2 hours. Yeah. Sorry, 56 minutes early. Hooray!
Another presentation. No, we have
Oh,
another
that's right, yes.
presentation. You're not the only show here.
Oh, I didn't think it was the only show. I just forgot that was not the last one.
Yeah.
Right, next up is malicious hubs. I'm going to hand you slide control, so you should get buttons on your feed echo. Where are you? Here you are.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Srinidhi Amuri, presenting on behalf of Dr. Eric Berger on malicious hubs of the Mini protocol. And in the last IETF 123, we have introduced a client-driven audit layer that uses Merkle tree-based proofs to detect malicious hub behavior in the Merkle groups. In the Mini group. Sorry. And we call this client-driven because we're not modifying the hub, or we're also not adding any new trusted servers, and we're not making any changes to the MLS or the Mini architecture. Our implementation has the clients each have their own ordered list of messages and timestamps, and the clients randomly generate and broadcast Merkle proofs with the regular messages, and we do that with probabilistic rate sampling. And the receiving client will verify these Merkle tree proofs against the local list of messages, like the Merkle tree generated with the local list of messages, and a mismatch would trigger an alert, and the alert is broadcast across the Mini group. So now we want to propose tombstones to handle the deleted messages in the Mini group, like how we would handle it for Merkle trees. And the tombstones are basically null placeholders that replace the original message with a null value, and we believe that they preserve the auditability and verifiability by not modifying the message list indices. On the left side, we see an image where we deleted message 3, but since we're not using tombstones for this Merkle proof generation, we see that the message 4 is replacing the index 3, and we believe that this will remove any proof of existence of the message 3. And on the right, we see that we are replacing the message with the null value instead of removing it completely. We are only replacing it with the tombstone, and we believe that this will preserve the auditability of the message list. And so with that, we welcome any insights or suggestions on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for presenting. Just a quick clarifying question. How exactly, so it's a client-to-client protocol essentially, because obviously we don't trust the hub here.
Yes.
So how are they gossiping this? How is it being exchanged between clients and when?
Exchanging, you mean the Merkle proofs?
Yes.
Yeah, so the Merkle proofs, the clients each generate a Merkle proof of its own, and in the message list, we will be replacing the message with a null value.
But how, like in which instance are clients exchanging that?
Yes,
That's
so
not clear to me.
okay, so we are randomly a client could request a Merkle proof, and that would trigger all the clients in the group to like send proofs, and they would all a client would send a proof, and they would all the other clients would also generate a proof of their own. They would the client that is receiving the proof will verify the proof against uh, the proof that it generates locally. So all of them have the message list. So we are saying that we would be having the null value replace the original message. So yeah.
Okay, I think for my understanding, maybe others feel the same way. It would be super helpful to have an overview of the protocol exactly. You know, when a client decides to generate something or decides to request something, and then when it decides to send it out, how it should react when it receives it, etc. And maybe some very concrete examples where you have a group of, I don't know, A, B, C, and you go through some, you know, scenarios
Yes.
that are likely to occur.
So we're doing that probabilistically. So we have these formulas. Yes, we have these rate sampling formulas that we're using to generate this probabilistically so that the hub, if it's malicious, we obviously don't want it to know that a client is sending a proof. So we're doing this random generation. So with that, we're able to, like, the client is able to send these proofs, broadcast them. Yeah.
There's a little section in the draft about this. Maybe not as much detail as you want, but
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to pinpoint here is you use these terms like broadcast and send, but what I want to understand is that a gossip protocol? Like, does a client decide to, based on the value of some, random number, that now it's time to send out something because it hasn't sent out something in a while? Or is that always coupled with other messages? So it's like these specifics that I find important because that's like the make it or break it moment for this kind
Yes,
of.
so we've discussed the probabilistic formulas in the draft. Yes, so you could look them up. Yeah, thank you.
how many people have read this draft? Rowan. Okay. So the last time, right? Yes, fair enough. Yeah, so I think if people are interested in this, it would be good to review the draft. I think the specific question about the tombstone is a little hard to get to because we need more people to review the concept overall.
So I'm curious. So right now this is an ID draft burger, but if this happens, does it go on as its own draft as an optional thing that implementations can do, or does it become part of MIMI protocol? This might be a question for Rowan, in fact. But of course, Trinity, if you want, feel free to answer.
So I was gonna ask an unrelated question. I mentioned when Eric proposed this last time, I asked about if the franking mechanism is taken into account, how does the analysis change? Was anything taken into account regarding franking in the when you added the tombstones, and did any other changes?
Yeah, so we've not considered franking for tombstones, but tombstones, franking, we did consider the last time, and I think we clarified it when you said like the franking mechanism is there to, like, you know. Protect against any of the malicious stuff, right? So, but franking is like basically like stamping the message that is sent. So I think they're both different in a sense that we are saying about reordering the messages and dropping messages. I think even that could still happen even if even if the message is stamped, and because we're saying the malicious, the hub is malicious. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment that franking doesn't solve the problem of dropping and finding out, discovering that messages were dropped. I just the last time there was no mention of franking, and like there was some specific thing that Eric mentioned that is actually solved. It was one of the potential attacks, and it not a big deal, but it'd be nice to fix that.
Okay, yeah, we will definitely add it in the new draft. Thank you.
Okay, and then insofar as having more stuff in MIMI protocol, I'm kind of hesitant to add new stuff, but I don't think it's a problem for us to have. I mean, we've got extensions for MIMI content. I don't see why being able to add new endpoints or add new functionality, even negotiate new functionality in MIMI protocol, why we can't do that. And so I would say that maybe the new issue to add to MIMI protocol is to make sure that you can there's already an issue for doing versioning, but having a way to signal additional extensions that may add things on the wire, that would be maybe a good way to handle this, because it gives you a hook to attach to plug your Lego brick into the side of the Mimi protocol.
That makes sense, because now that I think of it, in fact, this would require like client behavior, whereas Mimi protocol is really about server to server behavior.
Right. So the important thing for Mimi protocol is signaling that this thing is happening or it's available, not how the clients do it.
Yeah, I was just gonna essentially say the same thing. At a very high level, this should be considered like franking and not be part of the base protocol, and then also be optional, because the bar is pretty high to get something into the Mimi protocol, and that doesn't scale very well at some point. Who knows what else we're gonna think of and want to include in the future. But I actually, for the record, I disagree that Mimi is just server to server, because like especially franking and the whole MLS stuff, that's definitely involving the clients as well. So to a degree, the clients are part of it.
All right, Tridi, anything else, or are there any other questions or comments on this document and presentation?
Okay, I just wanted to ask, like, do you all think like tombstones are like a good way forward, or do you think it's something that wouldn't work or something? Oh, okay.
So we have a thumbs up from Rowan.
Thank you. And also, I
Yeah,
would
okay.
like to thank Rafael and Tim for sharing the implementation repos and creating PRs, for having the implementation on the READMEs. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, of course. All right, so that's all of the things we had on the agenda for today. Officially, we have 43 minutes left, so if there's any other Mimi things anybody would like to talk about, please feel free to speak up. I just see nothing but contented smiles in the room. And silent. One more time, please. And tumbleweeds in, yeah, tumbleweeds in the chat. So I think we'll call it. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you at the next Mimi.
Used the notes taker. Okay, so I put a lot of things in here. And now what?
Oh, now we eventually go click import notes.
Do I have to have a publishing something?
You did the
Can you check that?
IETF notes. It's always best effort. Just,
yeah, that's no, that's not but more like you are seeing something. Yes, it's not that I close my window and everything is gone. So that's why I was thinking, go.
I understand. Yep, well worth checking.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for doing that.
It's fine. Thank you.
I was able to add something. So.